Hi, this is LDR350, Leading with Communication, Chapter 8, Presenting Yourself Like a Leader. This is Dr. Pike again, by the way. Dr. Davis will be back next week. We're going to start with setting nonverbal communication goals. Credible leaders have more followers because they exert more influence. You're more likely to follow a leader that you trust and have admiration for, or at least respect. Self-reflection, looking in and out. Leaders may not be able to control events, but they should be able to control the behavior they exhibit when responding to events. Attributed to Albert Mehrabian. Excuse me if I butchered his name, I have a tendency to do that. On page 141 of your text, this communication scholar determined that 7% of our emotional understanding of others is attributed to their words, 38% to their vocal tone, and 55% to their facial expression. Continuing in the same vein, when a leader's words and nonverbal cues conflict, the followers will believe the nonverbal message. There's an essential skill that you have to master as a leader: how you enter a room, your ability to express appropriate emotions, the way you use your voice, your understanding of how nonverbal communication sends messages about messages. They call these meta messages that reveal how to interpret what is said. Your faculty in detecting when others are not sincere, the meta-communicative functions, communication about communication, helping to clarify both the nature of a relationship and or the meaning of verbal messages. Now, how do nonverbal messages function? We've all seen that person that tends to roll their eyes or cross their arms or avert their gaze. These nonverbal cues may contradict or negate a leader's verbal message. Such interaction represents a double message. Words say one thing, verbal cues say another. Nonverbal cues can emphasize or underscore a verbal message. Raising or lowering his or her voice or slowing the rate of speech can deliberately stress series of words to authenticate their importance. Nonverbal cues can regulate or control interaction. With eye contact, gestures, and voice, the leader can control who should speak next and direct the flow of verbal exchanges. This can influence others' judgments. Now, we're going to continue in the same of how nonverbal messages function. Nonverbal cues can complement a message, such as placing a hand on the shoulder of someone when expressing concern. Now, of course, we all know that this isn't appropriate in some situations, but used as a teaching model here, it can emphasize one's point. Nonverbal cues may substitute for a verbal message. Examples would be embracing someone in a morning or a shrug of the shoulders instead of answering a question verbally. Now, I want to emphasize again that it's important to know your audience, to understand the vicarious liability we extend by putting a hand on someone else. These are sticky situations that may need to be avoided to not get yourself in trouble. These are just teaching ideas. And in the real world, especially in today's sue-happy world, we want to be careful of extending touch to those people that may not be interested in receiving that sort of communication. Nonverbal behavior has a message value. Behavior, whether intentional or unintentional, is ongoing. Leaders continually emit a wealth of nonverbal information. And this is true, as it is next to impossible to communicate nonverbally. Nonverbal communication is ambiguous. What we're communicating nonverbally is at risk for misinterpretation. One nonverbal cue can trigger a variety of meanings. All nonverbal behavior should be interpreted within specific context. Think about a moment when you misunderstood a situation or you misread what a person was telling you. You want to play those situations back in your head and create learning moments from them. Continuing in the characteristics of nonverbal communication is primarily relational. Our primary means of revealing our inner states that typically are not readily transmitted using words is through nonverbal communication. Frequently, we're unaware of the nonverbal cues we send, inadvertently revealing information that we'd rather conceal. Now, whether subconscious or not, our intention to manage the impression we convey means that we will do our best to communicate a message that is in our best interest or in the better interest for those people that we lead and represent. Using nonverbal communication to project leadership. Recognizing the power of congruence is the first step in being perceived as congruent, and it is essential for a leader to be perceived as a leader. We want to exhibit the command presence of being a person that is worthy of the position and also trustworthy as a confidant and a person that can help others, traverse the difficulties in their day-to-day existence. The nonverbal messages that the leader emits consciously and unconsciously determine whether followers will judge him or her to be credible, which in turn determines whether they will be convinced to follow the leader. Because we look at the appearance when assessing leaders, leaders work at communicating the image they want others to perceive. Power and appearance are important. I remember in the former job that I've held in local government that people had image consultants to understand what a power tie or a power suit looked like because they wished to convey a message to the general populace that they were trustworthy and they had a viable mission to be carried out. Leaders will sometimes even alter their appearance to enhance their looks. You'll notice this in some politicians when they start coloring their hair darker, or they assume a dress that is more like the common people and not maybe the Armani suit. This can have the opposite of the desired effect, as it can impair the leaders being able to use nonverbal communication to enhance understanding. Imagine having Botox injections where you can't emote or you don't have the ability to frown or smile. This could make others less apt to have empathy for what you're trying to tell them, or it may injure your own believability. It also has been found to interfere with empathizing abilities. And there's the Botox. Power and appearance continued. Dressing in high-status clothes, having an individual sense of style, and standing tall can each individually and together can help convey the leader's position and dominance. First impressions are very important to perception of you as an overall leader. You need to self-monitor and be aware of your own behavior. Now, I've heard it said many times that if you cannot control yourself, you can never control others. And it's important to meter individual aspirations against what is beneficial to the collective, whereas it pertains to your job or the betterment of society. A leader's body language, leading with kinesics. It's a Greek word meaning movement. Study of the relationship between the body language and communication, including the study of facial expression, posture, and physical gestures. Now, looking at an example of this, when we look at faces, we can tell if someone's upset with us or they're happy with what we're doing. You can see pride on a face. You can see anguish on a face. For most persons, that's why they use small emoticons when they're sending text messages or emails. This enables the end user, the person that's receiving the message, to understand that the message is being sent in the context in which it was meant. Those emoticons help us to recognize the sender's kinesics. You want to be mindful of what your voice is saying as well as what your face is saying, because it is the most important broadcaster of emotions. You want to avoid having your face weaken the position with followers. And if you're showing absolute displeasure while you're giving someone a commendation, that may not be received in the way that you intend. The intensification or exaggeration of facial expressions to meet the follower's expectations can get you in trouble. You don't want to be seen as a disingenuous person by overreacting to a situation facially. You want to intensify or de-emphasize an expression to conform to what others would deem appropriate. Just be genuine. In the next point, we see that you can neutralize expression to display inner strength. And if you're interested in this, there are several videos on Stoicism that is about not showing any emotion to what's being said to you. But understand that this can impact your approach to others as well as your own approachability. Many people won't want to speak to someone who won't emote when they're spoken to. You can mask emotion by replacing one emotion with another. And this in itself can be disingenuous. So you want to be careful with those behaviors. Eye contact, very important, and we discussed this in last week's lecture. Maintaining eye contact enhances leadership. As I told you before, there was a little trick that I learned in that I would look at the skin on the bridge of the nose when I was younger to be able to convey that position, that command presence, so that other person would know that I was focused on what they were saying and they needed to be focused on my direction. This conveys confidence. It suggests the leader has nothing to hide. Receivers tend to perceive information from a leader more positively when the leader makes eye contact with them. Leaders use eye contact to enhance their trustworthiness and seem more approachable. Effective leaders read the eyes of followers to watch for pupil dilation. That indicates interest and excitement. When you smile at someone, now no one is telling you to walk around smiling all the time, but sometimes we feel that way. But in a leader, it is important to smile at others to acknowledge that you're happy to see them, that you're happy with their performance. There is such a thing as the power grin, raising your chin so they look down at others with a dominant or false smile. A social smile, seen more as genuine, can meld minds of supporters. You want to be that person that isn't so lofty that you're looking down your nose at them. In your posture, you want to convey that posture of a leader with your shoulders back and upright. You want to keep your head raised. You want your spine erect and straightened. The taller you seem, the more powerful you appear. And the statistic from the book on page 148, 30% of Fortune 500 persons are at least 6 foot 2 inches tall versus 4% of all men and even fewer women. I thought this statistic important to include because I've seen persons that were 5'5" or shorter that had fantastic command presence. You see, I'm 6'5" and I'm over 300 pounds, and I've spent most of my life in public service in a law enforcement capacity of one kind or another. And I can tell you that I've seen some of the toughest people in the world, some of the people that I would fall in behind that barely broke 5'5". I know that none of them were on the Fortune 500 list, but they were people that I would follow into trouble situations, and they were fantastic leaders. And I believe that's the aim of this course as well as the program, is to turn out and make fantastic leaders. Moving along, body tension. The person who seems to be the most relaxed in a situation is perceived of having more power. You want to be that calm amongst the chaos, the eye of the storm. And in those people that I told you about before that barely broke 5'5", I've seen a lot of them walk into situations and be just as calm as could be when everything was falling apart around them. So please keep in mind that analogy, to be the eye of the hurricane, the calm amongst the chaos. When you're gesturing, leaders use gestures to express confidence and signal dominance. Extending thumbs up expresses confidence in the thoughts and circumstances. Sorry, I'm navigating. The slide switched, and I'll get back to where we were. Keep your hands out of your pockets when you're speaking to others or you're trying to convey a point to subordinates. The hands in the pockets show uncertainty or lack of confidence. Not knowing what to do with your hands also shows the same. It shows that you may not be believing in what you're telling another person. You have to learn to control fidgeting, as it conveys nervousness. A leader's gait, manner of movement, and physical being work together to help others perceive the leader as resolute and determined. We want to talk about culture and nonverbal cues, because some of the things that we do may be offensive or misunderstood by others. In our culture, a nod indicates a yes, and completely different. In another culture, it means no. Leaders use space differently due to their power. Leaders are given more personal space, and they also control the degree of approach. Leaders are able to enter personal space of someone with less status easily. Leaders' office furnishings, and I found this interesting and worthy to include. They communicate formality or informality, status and power, and approachability. Leaders will typically sit at the head of a conference table to establish control. Different cultures give different meanings to proxemic cues. Japanese leaders have a comfort distance between people of 40 inches, and a Venezuelan, it is 32.2 on average. We want to talk about leading colors. Understanding the impact of color can give a leader advantage. At the initial part of this lecture, I spoke to you about a person that used to select a local government leader's ties because that person was an image consultant. An example given here is that blue has been adopted by the name of many companies: Big Blue, Blue Kite, Jet Blue, and blue is connected to sky and water, which are constant and steady. The example, again, leaders can communicate their authority and self-confidence by wearing red. When we're talking about time, and we're talking about the respective time, here in North America, Germany, and Switzerland, for example, we are all schedule driven, and we call ourselves monochronic. Polychronic cultures, South American, Mediterranean, and the Arab countries, are more flexible. They tolerate interruptions and are not schedule driven. Wise leaders understand the differences in time orientation. Wise followers respect the leader's orientation to time. In the U.S., time is a reflector of status. The person with higher status typically leads how the time orientation works. It determines who waits. Leaders require an appointment to be seen. but leaders can drop in on those with lesser status. In my own experience with jobs that I've held, I've heard it said, if you're early, you're on time, and if you're on time, you're late. Just to give you an example. When expectations are violated. Expectations violations theory states people develop expectations for appropriate nonverbal behavior based on cultural backgrounds, personal experiences, and their understanding of others. You want to be mindful of the way you treat others and the way that you're coming across to that other person culturally. You have to be mindful of the relationships that you have with other people. If the violating person is a rewarding communicator, high credibility, status, and attractiveness, we may simply adjust our expectation and even perhaps reciprocate. In other cases, we use reactive behavior to correct for the violation. Deception and immediacy. The truth about leakage, leadership lapses. Leakage is defined as the betrayal of internal emotions. Clinton and Nixon both emitted leakish cues, and thereby betrayed themselves to followers and unintentionally sent nonverbal messages that revealed their deceptiveness of their communications to others. And one only needs to take a look at Watergate to be able to understand what they were trying to overt in those situations that ultimately led to impeachment. Different strategies to deceive. Falsification is described as creating a fiction. Concealment is not revealing a reason for an action. Equivocation is changing the subject and dodging the issue altogether. As we continue deception and immediacy, cues that signal when a leader is lying. You want to look for nervous displays, excessive blinking, vocal tension, extraneous fidgeting, a fixated facial expression, negative emotion signs, limited eye contact, and vocal agitation. And you want to be mindful in yourself if you're displaying these things to people that you are trying to lead. Incompetent communication consists of making numerous speaking errors, displaying frozen or rigid posture, using exaggerated gestures, trying to convince others in what you're saying, displaying little spontaneity in communication, and delivering the soft pitch, which is more often or an attempt to over-control a voice. Immediacy is the degree to which someone appears to be approachable or likable. When we're looking at nonverbal immediacy behaviors, we look at direct eye contact, maintaining of close physical distance, exhibiting of natural body movement, smiling, vocal expressiveness, and variety. Leaders need to focus on mastering nonverbal cues to enhance leadership. Effective leaders are other-oriented, proficient self-monitors, and keen observers of others. We covered a great deal of information, and I appreciate you sticking with me thus far. We're going to transition now to Chapter 9, and I thank you for staying.